And as we're taking our seats, just as a housekeeping note for some of our Heartland staff, our next speaker has requested perhaps a cookie or a muffin. He's coming here directly without any type of sustenance. So in all seriousness, if we can have to arrange to have a cookie, muffin, something like that, that would be fantastic. So our keynote presenter, rather than me researching and coming up with an introduction, I thought I would just go to our presenter's website and read for you what he has to say about himself. James Delingpole, quote, writes brilliant books and brilliant articles and is really great on TV, radio, and the internet, too. You'll love him. You'll want to read his stuff, buy his book and music recommendations, follow him on Twitter, and generally be his best friend. The only thing James left out was claiming to invent the internet, but I guess that's already been taken. James Delingpole's columns on environmental issues are frequently published in the UK's most prominent newspapers, where his insightful and sharp-witted exposés of global warming misbehavior have been incomparable in effectiveness for disseminating the truth. James is the author of the outstanding recently published book, Watermelons. Ladies and gentlemen, James Delingpole.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. What a lovely warm welcome. I love you all already. But you knew that anyway. You may have noticed a spring in my step as I walked in this morning. That's because I was surfing the internet this morning and I read some incredibly good news. Our economy in Britain, I think like in America, has been suffering recently. And I discovered that our Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, a guy called Chris Huhne, is going to rescue our economy. Guess how he's going to do it? He's going to turn it into a low-carbon economy. And apparently this is really good news. Apparently, the low-carbon industry globally is worth £3.2 trillion, and it employs 28 million people, and it is growing at 4% per annum. This is fantastic news, and it compounds the joy I've already felt in America. I was staying in a hotel the other night, and I was staying in the Courtyard Marriott, and I got this sign on my bed, and it said that the hotel I was staying at was dedicated to preserving 1.4 million acres of endangered Amazon rainforest. Isn't that good news? And I went into the post office to buy some stamps. But not only was the post office offering me a postal service, it was also helping out the environment by giving me a leaflet with 10 ways I could save the environment. One of them was, why not ride a bicycle? Thanks, guys, for that tip. I think we can all agree here that we live in a wonderful green world. It is almost impossible to buy a product or stay in a hotel or do anything. Go and hear our kids perform a song in their school choir. And what do they sing to us? Well, my daughter the other day sang to me a song called When Will We Learn? And what I learned from this song was that I should feel really bad about myself. I feel that I have not respected Gaia enough. I feel that my very presence on Earth, in fact, to quote one of our favorite books, Limits to Growth, or The Club of Rome, the Earth has a cancer, and the cancer is man. So I learned to feel bad about myself. I think that's very important. And I want to feel better about myself by doing green things. And it's good that the Post Office, Marriott Hotels, and so on, and Chris Huhne, my Environment Secretary, are putting me on the path to ecological righteousness. How did we get here? How did we get to this point where almost everything... We can scarcely breathe without inhaling eco-fascist propaganda. What has happened to the world? This is the question that I set out to answer in a truly stupendously brilliant book that I recommend you all buy in vast quantities, not just for yourselves, but for your friends and families, enemies. The book is called Watermelons. I think you're all familiar with the pun. Green on the outside, red on the inside. Now, there is some, climate stuff in there, stuff about ClimateGate. But I feel a bit of it, as I said last year when I spoke at the Chicago conference, I feel a bit of an imposter talking about the science. I'm not a scientist, you may be aware. I read English literature. I leave the science stuff to you guys, and I think, it's good that we stick to our jobs. But I think what I try to do is inject a note of realism into the debate about climate change. You guys are doing it very successfully with the hard science. But also, I think you may just about be aware that this debate is not just about science. It is also about politics. And I think it's very important that the scam is exposed on every level, not just the scientific one, but also the ideological one. And I think that at the moment, some very, very bad things are being done in the name of environmentalism. Indeed, I sense a mentality in the green movement which I call the "in order to save the city, we must destroy it" mentality. Look at wind farms, for example. Wind farms are supposedly designed to save Mother Gaia by producing low-carbon energy. What do these wind farms actually do? Well, they chop up bats. Do environmentalists not like bats? Is it because they're scary? Are they fearful they might turn into vampires or something? Is that the level of scientific understanding among the environmentalists? Birds. What about birds? I thought, Audubon Society, all these organizations, the Sierra Club. Does the Sierra Club not like birds? Birds get chopped up by these things. What about all the rare earth minerals that are mined in China under extremely ecologically unfriendly circumstances? Is this okay because it happens in China out of sight? What about the soil, which is destroyed pretty much forever by the massive concrete bases needed for these monstrosities? What about the views that are destroyed? What about the landscapes that are blighted, possibly forever? Because I don't see any thought being put into decommissioning these things. I mean, if these were nuclear power plants, the Greens would be all over them. But somehow, because it's wind and wind blows so naturally, somehow wind farms are okay. So this is what I try and address in this book. The science I talk about in the first half, and in the second part, I talk about what it is that Greens actually believe. How did they get there to where we are today? And what you see pretty soon when you start reading the great texts of the Green movement. I'm thinking of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. I'm thinking of Paul Ehrlich's The Population Bomb, and I'm thinking most notoriously of the Club of Rome's Limits to Growth. And what these guys believe is, well, I mentioned this before, the earth has a cancer, the cancer is man. Essentially, they have a deeply misanthropic view of mankind, which is that we are the problem, not the solution, and that there is this thing called overpopulation, and that somehow it must be reduced, either directly, as, for example, those great Greens the Nazi Germans did, or indirectly, as Rachel Carson managed to achieve by effecting pretty much a worldwide ban on DDT. Also, a key tenet of the green religion, and it is a religion, I think we all know that, is the idea that there are these things called scarce resources, and that scarce resources must be preserved for future generations. Now, even though the situation I describe in my book is a very gloomy one, this is not a book of despair. This is a book of optimism. Because what I argue in the end, and I don't want to spoil the ending, and this is no reason not to buy the book, you understand. There's lots more to it. There's jokes and stuff and fun and facts and all sorts of, what I point out is that this green Weltanschauung in which one must choose between either economic growth or caring for nature. This is an entirely false dichotomy that, in fact, economic growth and environmentalism go hand in hand. Many of you will be familiar with the Kuznets curve, the idea that when a country achieves a certain sort of GDP per capita, at that point they can afford to start doing nice environmental stuff. Look at where the really bad environmental stuff happened in the last century. It was in the communist world. It was behind the Iron Curtain. It was not in the Western world. By the same token, as societies grow richer, so they have more money to set aside for all those things that we all like on both sides of the argument, whether we're warmists or realists or whatever you want to call us, and fluffy, bunny-hugging eco-activists. We all want the same world. None of us, I'm fond of saying, none of us looks at a beach and thinks, hey, you know what would really improve that beach? If it was covered with a nice oil slick with a dying pelican and a few baby sea otters going. None of us thinks this way. We all love the sea otters. We all love the pelicans. We all love the pristine sands and the crystal clear waters. We all want this stuff. And as a kind of nature boy myself, somebody who likes long country walks, somebody who's just recently taken up surfing and thinks that's the coolest thing too, I really resent the implication that me and people like me and people like you are nature haters. We are nature lovers too. And all I'd like to do by way of a conclusion is to just mention a discussion I had with some friends last night with Ron Bailey and Julian Morris and Pat Michaels and Myron Ebel, and we were all saying, we were talking about how we're constantly being accused of being funded by big oil and big carbon and big evil and stuff, and we all agreed that this was a bit of a pernicious myth, that in fact we are so totally on the wrong side of the argument if we want to make money. Because as we all know here, to our bitter cost, all the money goes onto the other side. 3,500 times more money goes into funding warmism than goes into funding skepticism, according to Joe Nova. But I would like to say one thing to you guys. I would rather be living in a hovel with all of you than in a mansion with Al Gore. Thank you. Thank
you. Now, some of you may be expecting a Q&A period, but I think it's very appropriate to let you know that outside we have James Delingpole has his books. He will be selling them and signing them. And if I were to let you ask questions here, you probably wouldn't ask them there, and then you would fail to take advantage of the opportunity to become James's best friend, as his website urges you to do. Well, thank you very much, James.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn the microphone over to Joseph Bast, I'd just like to make a few observations here myself. It wasn't too long ago, 5-6 years ago, that we were having an internal debate in the Heartland Institute because some of our friends and allies were saying, you really have to stop fighting the science argument. Even if you're right, and even if we all agree that we're right, the fact of the matter is because we're losing so bad in the court of popular opinion, you're taking us down on other issues. and we decided that truth was worth pursuing. We were going to fight the fight. We were going to get the science out. And it's so encouraging to see the polling numbers that we've seen in recent years that I mentioned yesterday. It's also so encouraging. We had a question after the first panel and a comment about how in Wisconsin, how somebody got involved, contacted their state legislator, got the word out to the media, and it made a substantial difference in Wisconsin. That is what we're doing here at this conference, getting the science out to people. That is what each and every one of us can do when we return to our hometowns, when we return to our communities, talk to our neighbors. Through grassroots information, dissemination of information, we can and do make a difference. We'd like to help you as best we can with the Heartland Institute, but also on your own, if we can emulate what happened in Wisconsin, and not just regarding environmental issues and global warming, but the things that we believe in, we can and do make a difference. Among those lines, among that line of thought, I had presented to me today information about a climate science conference taking place in Mumbai, India in October, and I'm just thrilled to see this. The title is Science of Climate and Changing Public Policy, Checking Theories Against Reality, very much in line with what we've discussed during the past 2 days. This is being put together by the Liberty Institute in collaboration with Mumbai University. Among the speakers will be Dr. Soon, who just spoke, and I expect that this is going to be very, very helpful spreading the word internationally as well as here in the United States. This is an international conference on climate change, but it's very important that people get together outside the U.S. and hold conferences such as this. So I urge you to look this up online, or you can talk to Willie Soon. Once again, it's put on by Mumbai University and the Liberty Institute, and they're also open to adding more speakers. They haven't completed their panels yet, so perhaps some of the speakers here today might be willing to talk there. Finally, I'd just like to note that debates, particularly regarding a topic that can be so political as climate change and global warming, can be very sharp, especially when waged via email or internet blogs. And I myself have sometimes been drawn into these exchanges. And what happens when we have these scientific debates via email and blogging is that people don't connect with each other. People tend to think that the other side is evil and wicked, and of course we don't always convey what we wish to convey tone-wise, personality-wise in our emails and in our blog posts. I think it's fantastic that Dr. Denning was here today as he was last year. I really hope that we'll have others that will accept my invitation. I'm hoping we can do this again next year, Joe. But I will certainly spread the word and extend invitations. And I hope that for those of you that may have connections with some scientists who agree more with Dr. Denning, who may disagree with many of the speakers here, still we'd love to have them. We need to engage personally. That's how we're going to advance science. That's how truth is going to be figured out. During Dr. Denning's speech, although many of us disagreed with some of what Dr. Denning said, I thought it was fantastic that when Dr. Denning was talking about carbon fertilization, I see Dr. Craig Itzo, who's certainly an expert on this topic, nodding along with him. We have an issue of agreement that can serve as a bridge so that when we have issues of disagreement, we can talk civilly and constructively on the topic. Dr. Denning also talked about the mixing of temperature and carbon dioxide in the oceans. And Dr. Roy Spencer posted an article on his blog just the other day that deals with precisely that topic. So by getting together personally, and even if we're challenging each other, as Dr. Denning challenged us, and then some of the speakers challenged him back, nevertheless, instead of thinking, because we're only seeing this from afar impersonally, that the other people are nasty, wicked, hateful, etc., we can get together and we can actually constructively discuss these topics. So I commend you, Dr. Denning, and I hope we can see more of this in the future. And with that, I'd just like to thank each and every one of you. Many of you are old friends. Some of you I've met for the first time. For those I haven't met personally here, please introduce yourself or send me an email. It's been a fantastic time. I really appreciate your attendance. Thank you, one and all. Dr. Joseph Bath.
That was almost a field promotion to doctor there. But I am not a doctor of anything. Of course, I'd like all the people who spoke on panels and keynote presentations, if you could stand for a moment and have a round of applause for them, because I thought they were just terrific. Tom, come And as I mentioned this morning, we had 46, I believe, co-sponsors of this event. These are organizations that agreed to promote the event to their members, and they sent people here, and they have exhibit tables still set up out there. So if you can, become a member of those groups or buy their books, give them money, thank them on your way out for making this event possible. I'd also like to thank the New York Times, which did a really nice balanced piece about this conference in today's newspaper. It was in today's paper. Or yesterday's paper? Yeah, wow. So there's a first time for everything. I was interviewed for a couple of documentary films, and I want to quickly relate an anecdote from one of them. During the course of this interview, I was doing what I usually do, which is I say I started this organization 27 years ago. I'm all about learning stuff and the truth and changing public policy and individual freedom. I've learned a lot about climate change over the years. I am absolutely convinced that if you open the hood and look at the science on climate change, you're going to come away convinced that the science is very sketchy and very uncertain, and as a result, it doesn't justify the kind of public policies that are being advanced. And that's just my personal conviction. And I can't understand why the alarmists don't understand that. And I sometimes suspect that maybe they're not being honest themselves, and maybe they're just pursuing a paycheck. And when I was finished saying that, the guy behind the camera said, we just interviewed Michael Mann a few days ago, and if you just switch skeptic and alarmist, you guys sound exactly the same. And that was kind of an epiphany for me. So I think maybe Michael Mann, probably feels just as passionate as I do about my point of view. And it's something to keep in mind. I think the other side is passionate, smart, and probably well-informed on a lot of things. And I think we, as well, are passionate and smart. We're pretty darn well-informed about some things. We're convinced we're right. We can't both be right. And I think over the next few years, the weather may settle some of these debates, and some new scientific discoveries will as well. Will there be another Heartland conference, another international conference? The incremental cost of this conference, not counting staff time, okay, and we didn't do any print advertising this time, was about $450,000. $450,000. Those of you who bought tickets, you raised about $12,000 toward that. I've raised about $300,000 to pay for this conference so far. So when you guys all enjoy your 4th of July, I'm going to be making phone calls and sending out letters begging people for another $100,000 to cover the cost of this thing. Now, you might think the Heartland Institute, with this big budget, we can handle $100,000 here, $100,000 there. Typically, we don't have 4 weeks of spending in the bank. And we're running right to the wire every month, and that was a deliberate plan. We're not here to build an institution. We're here to win a campaign, and so it's a nut that we have to crack all the time. But it means that we are not at leisure to hold big conferences and lose lots of money. So if any of you are wealthy individuals, or if you have friends and relatives who might be, bring this conference to their attention. If you really want another conference, talk to them, have them contact us. I'm happy to send you the proposal that we circulate to try to raise funds for these events, but we really do need to raise money before we commit to doing another one of these things. All right, and finally, thank you all for coming. You were a great audience. I think it was a great conference, and I hope to see you again sometime. Thanks.